everybody, and welcome to another edition of There's a Will. This time in the studio with me, I have the estimable David Kaiser, a man who is busy trying to single-handedly, no, not single-handed, with a lot of other people to rectify some of the medical problems, medical aid problems with the Ukraine. Working with a lot of people involved in this area, including our guest on the horn. I call it the horn. It's not really a horn. That would be a Viking kind of thing, or maybe an American Indian or Native American, however you're supposed to say it these days.
Well, I don't know what you would actually call that today. It's the horn is close enough for government work.
The horn is okay? All right. And on the horn, from Bydgoszcz, with a beautiful portrait of a dog behind his head, because I saw him before, is Tony McFarlane Gonzalez. Hello, sir. How are you?
Alive and well.
Good to see you. Good to see you. Now, we've had a lot of things, interesting things happen. My earpiece is going to keep popping out. It's one of the favorite things that happens on this show. I'm not just itching my ear. Okay. So, but if my neck is very stiff when it's because I don't want the earpiece to pop out, hit off the wall, and come back and hit one of us in the eye.
That doesn't happen.
Yeah, and hit one of us in the eye, like one of those cartoons you watched when you were a kid. Something rigged up by Wile E. Coyote. Or Wile...
Wile E. Coyote.
Wile E. Coyote, yeah.
And the Roadrunner. Don't forget the Roadrunner there.
That's right. Beep, beep. There's been a lot of interesting developments. We're kind of in this, I won't say phony war period, but we're in this period in the war where there's kind of a stalemate. It's rather like people keep comparing it to the First World War. Why do you think they'd be doing that?
I don't know. Well, it's going on, but somehow or other, I'm optimistic the Ukrainians are going to hold. They're starting to get their weaponry that they need, and some of the reports that I get that Anthony Force pushes out every day. It's interesting. The new armament, and he can probably address it a lot better than any that they have, seems to be quite effective, and as a result, I think they're holding. And they're destroying a lot of the supply line, the logistical supply of the Russians, and I think that's key, you know. And maybe Tony can jump in and say
Tony,
something.
do you think the Russians can, following up what Dave was saying, do you think the Russians can continue to suffer the kind of losses that they're suffering just to take the rest of the Donbass? I mean, it seems extreme. At least, are we hearing correctly? What's your view on that?
Yeah, David's spot on, because the armament that they're getting, including the HIMARS that they just got, are able to destroy most of the depots and start disrupting their supply lines. The only issue that we face is that they continue to bring in a lot more of their troops, and I don't know how long they're going to be able to bring in more troops and more armament and supplies, because the Ukrainians are actually holding their own. Hopefully that is a tide to turn in the war, but we'll see, depending on if the armament that we have for them that have been sent over by Western nations can continue to flow in. We might be able to help them turn the tide, but that's to be seen.
Tony, I was watching, and David, I was watching a long documentary about FDR, Franklin Roosevelt, the 30s and World War II period on called The American Experience, old PBS thing. I'm watching it online, and it was interesting how much isolationism, America first, there was during FDR's time. There were a lot of people who were saying, under no circumstances do we want to go into a European war. Even if they attack us, we don't want to, you know, that's our fault somehow. Does that sound familiar in any way?
Well, we want to shy away from it. I mean, you look at our history, and we were not too excited about Vietnam, but we lasted in there. We're in Afghanistan. It took a long time. Americans really don't know until we have to be exposed. Then when we expose, we're united. That's the problem that we face today, that we do not know what the future is going to have as far as what other people want to do. And not necessarily whole countries, but individuals. And we got one, Vladimir, over here, We don't know what he's going to do.
We don't, and they keep talking about nuclear weapons, for example. This is so, it didn't happen during Vietnam. It didn't happen during any other conflict I can think of, where people, the one side was continuously talking about using nuclear weapons. The other side was talking about how to avoid the use of nuclear weapons.
Well, if you don't have them, you don't use them, and but everybody has them. The Russians have them, we have them, and we don't know what's happening with Iran. We don't know what's happening with North Korea at this time, and it's a dangerous world out there. Here we can observe it. In the United States, if you're in the United States, you don't necessarily are not that close. 5 hours from here, people have lost everything.
I think this is the important part. We're going to transition to talking about aid and relief in a second, but this is the important thing to remember, is that very close to where we're sitting in apparent abundance and peace, despite having a huge amount of refugees and difficult economy, relatively speaking, we're living in the clover compared to the people who are going through an absolute horrendous thing in the east of Ukraine, only 500 miles, 600 miles away.
We mentioned this early on. There were 1 million Ukrainians working in Poland when the war started. When the war started, 200,000 men went home immediately to fight. The refugees, 90% of the refugees are women and children. Unlike on the American border, 90% of the refugees are men. There's a big distinction there and big difference. 20% of the trucking industry in Poland were Ukrainian drivers. Overnight, they went home. So what I do find interesting in the medical sector, for an example, a hospital in Lublin, 1,000-bed hospital, very few Ukrainians in that hospital, and it's full. Psychiatric hospital, 800 beds nearby, full, very few Ukrainians, if any, in that hospital. So health care is provided for the Ukrainians. Education is provided. Poland has really stepped up to the plate and really hit a grand slam, in my opinion.
But the future looks difficult. Tony, difficult to say the least. Tony, have you heard about the, I know you have actually, the 1 million-man army that Ukraine is, it's been talked about trying to raise this amount of regular troops, but now it's back in the news right now as an actual goal that they're trying to achieve. Do you think it's achievable, and is it reasonable?
No, it's not. It's not reasonable at all. To look at the facts that they're facing right now, it's going to be extremely hard to get that 1 million man unless they're going to start pulling the kids that are kids. We're talking 14 or younger. Yeah, then they'll be able to pull it off. But no, fighting men age with 18 plus, it's going to be a tall order.
What's the fighting man age? 18 to 36 or 40 or?
For them, it's 18 to 55, and anybody that can carry a weapon and is still willing to march towards the enemy.
Right. Okay, so with a population of, 36 million with the 8 million that have left out of the 44 that it is normally. With that population, it's not possible in that age group to get 1 million men? Or is the problem not that you can get the men, as you said, you could get even younger ones, boys, which sounds distressing, but is the problem not just outfitting such a large army, and would it be effective?
I don't know about the effectiveness of that.
The United States would have a hard time having a really effective in the field 1 million men army right away. It would take some time, wouldn't it?
It would take time to train them, Doc. Effectively, to train personnel to even just get through the basics. 4 to 6 months, and that's 4 months of actual, just regular combat training, and then possibly 2 to 3 months of your MOS, your job in the military, to properly be an outfit. So it's going to be a very tall order for them to do that. We've already had links with some of the Ukrainian spec ops that wanted to have the same kind of training, and I told them, yeah, good luck. You wanted to do special operations training in 4 weeks when it usually takes about 18 months, and then they have continued follow-on training once they get to their units.
the actual training is not. I mean, there are great subtleties in the training, and to make somebody think that there's a special operations person after, or a special operator after a very a truncated training would seem to be a mistake.
It would be a very grave mistake, because what they wanted to do was send them right away after that training initially to the front lines. It's just basically sending a lamb to the slaughter. I was not willing to put a lot of my guys to train to go to do that, and we did reconnaissance on how they're actually conducting the training. It is basic level training, and they're calling them operators, and they're going to send them straight to the front lines. I did not agree with that, and I made that vocally known to the Ukrainian MOD.
Yeah, there's two things about the front lines. One of those, obviously, is being a trained combatant. The other is just dealing with being in such high-pressure life or death situations. It's another kind of problem, isn't it?
Yes. We talk about the training that they were doing. They did not have very good organizational skills. It almost seemed like they were doing it hodgepodge. We had reconnaissance guys go in. I had a couple MARSOC guys that wanted to go in there and check it out. I asked them to do that as a favor. And they were there for about 2 to 3 weeks. And they said that it was not very effective. They have communication problems. Trying to get the equipment to them was an extreme nightmare, because everybody in the Ukrainian depot was just wanting to grab every single piece of weapon and get it to the front lines without actually getting it to the people that needed it to conduct training and then to properly be effectively fielded. That they have a lot of internal battles that they're fighting within not only the MOD, but the MOH and the MOJ. MOJ. So that's why they're having huge communication issues. Other than that, holding off the front from the Russians that they're doing right now is absolutely internal. It's just something that they're wanting to do. It's sheer will that they're holding them off. So by us giving them the weapons and giving them a quick field training to actually operate that, yes, they're effective because they want to do it. But to have an effective operator, just an example of the operators, it takes years to get them to do that. At a minimum, 2 years. And that's because the initial 18 months is just a training to get you qualified to get to your units. And then the units have 6 months to a year to keep on training you. And then after that, you still have more years for training to be effective, because you're not an expert regardless. Because if they think they're an expert after 2 or 3 years, no, sadly mistaken. You're never an expert, because you're constantly learning. And you have to keep up that skill. It's like a language. If you lose it, if you don't practice it, you lose it.
Or golf.
True. And I wish I sucked at.
Golf
I
is
know
terrible.
nothing about that.
One bad shot leads to another. A terrible life
Never
lesson.
got past the first water hole.
A terrible life lesson. Yeah.
Let me get past the first sandbarge.
Yeah. Well, we should go out sometime. We go to the driving range anyway, and we'll tell some more stories. Thanks for saying that, because I think people misunderstand the difficulty of training, the difficulty of logistics in these operations. You can have a heck of a lot of willpower. You can have all the willpower in the world, but if you don't have the basic training and the esprit de corps and the logistics, you're in a lot of trouble, aren't you?
Well, you got to learn how to lay on the ground like a sheet on a bed.
Yeah.
Flat.
You worm right into the ground, right? Yeah.
Well, just one thing to add to that, you can actually see how effective a logistics plan can be, and not to toot the horn on Russia, or actually to pull the drape over their facade. Their logistics was absolutely horrible. And you see that because they went up against this somewhat quote-unquote inferior force that they should have overwhelmed them, but their logistics didn't catch up to them. And that's something that they should have learned from Alexander the Great, because that's what he held. He held accountable were his logistics, and those generals were his key personnel. Without them, he would have failed his eastern movement towards the Indians, towards the
Indian subcontinent. Yeah. That's a very interesting point. Even Alexander the Great, I say even because he's such a model for warfare, as anyone who's studied a bit of it knows, or read a book about warfare, that he valued logistics. Hannibal valued logistics in the same way.
Yeah.
So this is an ancient thing. It's not a new thing. And yet we still seem to forget, or we think, well, we got all these modern apparati to move things, so we've got that logistics knocked on the head. But it's not true, and medical aid is an area where that's not true either, isn't it?
Well, there's a lot of people right now working on medical infrastructure development in Ukraine. A lot of NGOs are working, not only getting supplies in, but transporting wounded people, civilians, also kids from the battle lines, providing protection. The situation in the medical side it's overwhelming right now. We've got correspondents from the Ministry of Health in Ukraine, a lot of overwhelmed with need, psychological as well as physical need. And there are several programs working on that. Tony has been very active. Something else we learned I
should disclose you and Tony are doing some work together.
Well, we're working from time to time together. In fact, we're on the phone just about every day, so that's close enough.
And Tony's a medic by trade.
He's a real hero. Look what he did in Afghanistan.
It's amazing, getting people out. Yeah.
Yes, and
we talked about that the last time. It's quite incredible.
Something else I learned recently: there are over 4 million people in Ukraine right now that don't have drinkable water. And there's a gentleman by the name of Air Mobile Joe, who's transporting water units. He's got 40 units now, each capable of producing 20 to 25 gallons of water per hour. Each unit is like a big briefcase. It'll sit in a compartment overhead in an airplane. It's capable of producing 20 to 25 gallons of water an hour.
Wow.
It runs with a plug-in. Anywhere in the world, it's got electric plug-in. If you don't have that, it has a capability to do off of battery of your car, off the battery of the motorcycle. Of course, if the battery goes dead on the motorcycle, you turn on the motorcycle. So it works continuously. It's a nice device, and it'll take dirty water and make it pure and 25 gallons an hour. But there are
why do they need this so much in Ukraine? Just to
well,
make
there's
it clear
over
to
4 million people right now that don't have really drinkable water.
Because of the bombings and et cetera,
and
the
the disruption of water pipes and just bacteria that sets in and so forth.
Yeah. So there's huge problems, and water is essential, obviously.
Yeah.
Food is essential, but water is something that you need even more than
absolutely
food in the short term.
Absolutely.
Especially in summertime. When
But my hat goes out to him in his efforts to do this, and he'll probably be back with another 5 units in the next couple of weeks.
We'll have to get him on the show. If he's
I think he would be very good to
I'd
get
like to
his.
see one of those units. That'd be interesting. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had by chance I met him. I met him once before here, but then I met him and picked up 5 units from him and gave them to August Mission to distribute them into Ukraine.
August Mission, another one of these
here,
philanthropic
there, and everywhere.
Yeah. Bruce Roberts was on the show a couple of times, and I know that you're in touch with them. There's several organizations that we've had on here, then, and some of you are working together, as you and Tony are. Then with Bruce and August Mission. Bruce
and there's
Roberts
a lot of people working together. Phil Goss.
Phil Goss, who's been on the show. He was on with you.
And we'll get him back in town and keep him busy.
When he gets back in town, he's going to be very busy. He's gonna have to run around town like run around Sue.
Well, or circle back Jan. You know,
circle back Jan. I didn't know her.
Run around Sue, and I used with the press conferences, I called it Circle Back Jan.
Is that okay? All right, that makes sense. Yeah. I wanted to ask what do you think about the stalemate that's going on in the East right now, Tony? Anthony, Mr. McFarlane. Captain McFarlane? How did I do? Yeah.
A long time ago, Captain. But no, just Tony. Easy as. But no, the stalemate, to talk about that, it really depends on who you're talking to. the Ukrainians say that there's no stalemate, that they're making progress, and then Russian propaganda, from what the intelligence that we say and see, is telling their people and the people of their networks that they have, so their allies, that they're actually making ground, that they're winning the Donbass, that they're hitting strategic targets, when that is just pure propaganda, that they're hitting strategic targets. The targets that they're hitting are infrastructure and innocent targets of people. So the Ukrainians, they claim that they are hitting targets of depots. Yes, they are hitting them, but is it effective enough? So
they've been hitting some targets, even like fuel depots over the border in Russia, haven't they?
Yes.
Off and on. But
often, and if they can get close enough, because the HIMARS have a certain range that they have to, so they have to be very close to almost destroying that critical asset.
What 150 kilometers? Is that the max of?
150 effective kilometers.
Yeah. So these new pieces are helping them, but on the other hand, how are they hitting those depots? Not with howitzers, not with
No, HIMARS are rocket-propelled launchers.
The rocket-propelled launchers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They're missiles. Not rocket-propelled, but they're missiles, actual missiles. Mm-hmm. If you look up HIMARS, they're, I forget the nomenclature, but rocket systems. So it's a multi-rocket system. And I don't know if it's high intensity or high effective. I don't know what the heck HI stands for, but the MRS is multi-rocket launch system.
And they've been using those, but one of the worries in giving these longer distance things, weapons, not things, but weapons to the Ukraine, or to Ukraine, was that, or the Ukrainian army, is that they would use them to go over the border and create more of a problem with the Russians, or stir up the hornet's nest more.
Well, these new weapons are very accurate, as opposed to artillery. And so
it's probably better to use those. But there was, I remember that and you'll remember too, that the President of the United States was saying, we don't want to give, initially, we don't want to give these long distance with weapons with range that goes into Russia, because we don't want to stir up.
Don't want to provoke them.
Yeah, that's right. And it seems like they got these things anyway, because they are using them to
And they're getting more. They're going to get more from what I've read. They're coming in.
Do we, in the last couple of minutes, do we have to, I just want to come back to this thought, do we have to fight the Russians there so we don't have to fight them in other places in Europe, like as in the Suwałki Gap between...
Well, we've chatted about that, and it's a dangerous area. Russia needs that gap to move from Kaliningrad, in my opinion, to support Belarus, and also to go in the other end of Ukraine. And so far, nothing's happening there. I mean, everybody's alert, but I don't think anything's definitely happened there. Anthony may have some information on that.
Should we be worried about that, Anthony?
Not really. Now that Sweden and Finland have joined the NATO alliance, because now we basically effectively control the Baltic, and that's what he doesn't want and didn't want. That's why he put up a huge fight. Turkey tried to slow that effectively down, but they had other agendas. So Turkey, I really don't think, has a really good relationship with the Russians. So no, we really don't need to worry about that right now. I say that with a grain of salt, because we don't know the type of equipment that is in Kaliningrad, or is not made public, because there are some other weapons there that Russia is using, or have been in development for a few decades, that now have started coming into light, especially with the nuclear-powered torpedo. You guys can look that up. I don't remember the exact name of that contraption, but it is something that...
And the Iskander rockets as well,
yes,
which are the hypersonic. Yeah, okay, we've got to leave that for now. We'll come back, and we're going to be talking in the second half about UFOs, because this gentleman right here, on the 75th birthday? Anniversary of the Roswell incident in July of 1947, 75 years right now, and you grew up in Roswell. Leave that as a cliffhanger, and we'll be back after this message. Thanks for watching.
Good.
Hello, everybody. When you hear that beautiful song, it means that it's time to come back for a little more of the show.
I'm glad to hear that.
And that rhymes with UFO show. UFO show.
Not necessarily in that order.
Yeah, you're going to tell us a lot of exciting stuff
Well,
here.
I don't know
David Kaiser. David Kaiser. And on the horn, we have Tony McFarlane Gonzalez from beautiful downtown Bydgoszcz. Now, I don't know if he's downtown, but I imagine him downtown in one of those skyscrapers in Bydgoszcz.
Last time I saw him, it was at the Holiday Inn. We had a nice supper.
Is that right? In Bydgoszcz?
Yeah.
Very nice.
Wow. I didn't stay in the Holiday Inn. I stayed out of town on the river there, going out towards the Vistula River. There's a hotel called the Mill, the Mwyn, something Mwyn. Do you know the hotel I'm talking about? I don't know. It's about, you just walk, it's about 1.5 kilometers out of town. But anyway, beautiful town. It's a pleasure to go there. And when we were in the break, Tony, we said we were going to talk with David a little bit before we go into UFOs and its relevance with David's life, because you were abducted, weren't you?
No, not really.
No?
No.
No?
Unfortunately.
You weren't abducted?
No. No abduction.
A little hide and seek?
No hide and seek either.
Blindfolded for a few minutes?
No, never happened.
No, nothing like that. Okay. We'll get it out of him if we have to drag it out of him kicking and screaming. So, Tony, we're going to talk a little bit, though, a more serious subject about what Sweden and Finland in NATO means strategically, etc. You want to have at that subject?
Yeah, sure. Let me tackle that with you guys. So now that we have the NATO alliance, that they are approved of members, that means that NATO is closer to Russian borders than ever before. Russia was really struggling with Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, and they kind of had problems with that in the late 90s, early 2000s. But now that Sweden and Finland are there, it's tough luck for them, because that's a lot of border that is NATO right next to it. And we can have NATO allied bases and keep an eye on them closer. And that's not only that, but it controls the Baltic. I had hinted at that before. This one of the reasons why Russia never let go of Kaliningrad after the fall of the Iron Curtain back in, of course, 1999 was the official fall, or was that 1990? I really don't remember.
91.
91?
Well, 89 was
the
the Central Europe and the wall falling in November of 89, and Romania in December, et cetera, Velvet Revolution in Czech. But the 91 was when Russia, the Soviet Union, gave up the ghost, so to speak. Yeah.
Cool. And that's when it changed over to somewhat well, I don't even call it democratic anymore, because it's more autocratic. But yeah, so with that, I don't know what not NATO's, but Russia's next move is going to be now that Sweden and Finland have joined there. They've threatened, don't do it. There would be repercussions. What repercussions? It's just like a boy crying wolf. And eventually the wolf being NATO, is going to just get sick and tired of it and just kind of just turn the blind ear. So it's getting there. Now, that's just my prediction. I really don't know what he's going to do, because he's extremely unpredictable. We don't know if he has some extreme illnesses, or if he's on his last dying legs, or if he just wants to do this continual legacy, or what. We have no clue. But yeah, this is a very good thing for NATO and all the allies that we now control the Baltic, and we're a lot closer to Russia. But then, again, there is the northern part of the world that Finland and Sweden and Norway have, that we also have now control, or somewhat closer to, with NATO, to have access to that. So it's going to be very crucial for that.
Yeah, the Arctic is where also you come up against Russia at the top of the world. So this is very interesting. I read an article recently, I don't know if you saw it, about the conflict in the Arctic.
Actually, I want the what is it called? Where the Coast Guard gives a brief every year to DOD and other agencies from the United States, stating that the waters are receding, that the activity in the north is going to be much more prevalent, especially with Russia and China wanting to control the north. And Canada was there, of course, the United States and other allies were there. The British commanding general was also there briefing and also telling to the allies about how it's going to be crucial for control. And with the NATO membership, he was pushing the NATO membership for Sweden and Finland. So before that, so that he was there. But yeah, it was a really, really, really good brief that they gave, and I absolutely advise anybody that is really into this to actually take a look at it.
And how do we find it?
The brief?
Yeah, what do we look up?
Yeah, Doc, you just got to go to Google and type in U.S. Summit on Arctic Operations.
Very good. I'll do it myself. I hope the people watching will do it. Sounds fascinating. We'll have a conversation about that later. But now it's time to throw the spotlight onto Mr. We call him General Kaiser. We call you General and
No.
behind your back. Yeah, that's what we call you, me and Tony. You were only a colonel, I believe.
No, I was a captain.
You were a captain.
Infantry captain.
Okay.
Yeah.
Infantry captain, and why not? That's what I say. Chulai. Based in Chulai, right?
No, Hoi An and Quezon.
Quezon.
Not Quezon, Quezon.
But they called it, didn't people mispronounce it?
Well, if you're from Texas and New Mexico, yeah, you can mispronounce it.
Because I remember they called it Quezon. And if you go look at the documentaries about Vietnam. But before you were in Vietnam, when you were a young fellow in short pants, you lived
in Roswell, New Mexico.
In Roswell, New Mexico. And something very interesting happened there that in 1947, 75 years ago in July, this is the anniversary, it was a few days ago, of the Roswell incident. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well,
and
in 47, we had an incident involving what resulted in one of the best UFO stories, the Roswell incident. A UFO crashed in the desert about 75 miles outside of Roswell. Now, it's strange about this time that this happened in 1947. My family moved there in 1957. In 1968, I graduated from college. Only in 1980 did I hear anything about this incident. And I was in a bookstore in Ruidoso, New Mexico, which is about 90 miles outside of Roswell. And there's a story about the Roswell incident. And I said, gee, I never heard about this. So I opened it up and I'm flipping through the pages. And there on the cover is the picture of one of my girlfriends, high school and college girlfriend's father, who wrote the book. Well, this was in 1980. I never heard anything about it. Nobody talked about it. Well, anyway, to make a long story short, I was in 1998. I was in Warsaw, and I called my best friend in Roswell, and I asked him, to wish him a Merry Christmas, and I was talking to his mother, and I said, well, I see Walter Hott, who was an author of this book, on TV talking about the UFOs. And she said, yeah, we used to live next to them on 7th Street in Roswell, and I was dating the mortician who was asked for the 5 small coffins.
For the
aliens.
The alien bodies, because they were supposedly killed. Yeah.
And a lot of interesting things. So in 2001, I'm back in Roswell, and I visit my friend, the daughter of the guy who wrote the book. And I said, Beth, when did you hear about this UFO? You grew up with your father. And her father was the one that said, we have a flying saucer, to the Roswell Daily Record, which was subsequently retracted the next day. But nevertheless, he was the public information officer for Walker.
Your girlfriend's father was the public information officer
who said, we have a flying saucer.
Right. And what was his, did he always stick with that story?
Yeah, pretty much so. And I asked her in 2001 when we went through, I said, when did you hear about it? She said about the same time you did, somebody came in and wanted my father to autograph the book. That's the first time
He'd never spoken to her about it.
He never knew anything about it. And
he never spoke to his daughter about it.
She never heard anything about it until the book was signed.
Why did he not speak about it?
People didn't talk about it. And of course, he was, you know,
Why?
as a military officer, he was under kind of a hush-hush.
He was told to be quiet.
But everybody else, and subsequently I was reading about him the other day, he had evidently written some documents that only to be released after his death. And I think they've been released. And I wrote her the other day saying if they're available. I'd be curious to see what he has to say about it. But his younger daughter became the manager of the UFO Museum in Roswell, which they put together. And my best friend...
Walter Holt's younger daughter.
Yeah.
Your girlfriend, your ex-girlfriend's younger
She
sister.
ran the museum for a while.
Yeah. That's fascinating.
My best friend was on the board of directors that put together the museum.
Yeah.
Something interesting, if you like to go to McDonald's and you go to Roswell, New Mexico, you'll be able to eat in the only McDonald's that's shaped like a UFO.
Well, shaped like we presume a UFO is shaped.
Well, they all seem to be, you know, from early time. Ezekiel saw the wheel. You know?
Yeah. Ezekiel saw the wheel, didn't he?
Yeah.
That's right. Well, but there's two kinds of UFOs. There's the saucer or wheel shape, and then there's the dirigible. The sort of longer one looks like a paramecium. Then there are three. Then there's the triangle, which is a new one. That's ours, isn't it?
Well,
isn't that one of ours?
Ford is being inventive. You know,
isn't that one of ours? The triangle thing?
I don't know. I have no idea.
No.
You know,
how can it be that no one has any idea about any of this?
I think there's a lot of information. Now the government's doing hearings on the UFO. I wonder what they're going to come up with. Of course, who was it? H.G. Wells wrote the World of Worlds, or the radio program, scared everybody to death.
He wrote the book, and then Orson Welles made the radio program.
And scared a lot of people to death on it. I imagine it would happen again. So that may be why they kept it quiet.
They just kept it quiet because they already saw what happened with... So do you believe that there was a cover-up and that there were little alien bodies and coffins were said to be made? And
well, the coffins, I know that the Glenn Dennis, who was the mortician there, who was asked for small coffins.
He's the mortician
hermetically sealed
in the town
for the small bodies. So there were small bodies, apparently. And there was if you read the article, there was a nurse who witnessed autopsies. Yeah. And of course, she was transferred out 2 days later. So who knows?
Where? To Devil's Island? I mean, where did she go?
Well, she went to UK.
Got rid of her. They said, here, you'll eat beans and sausage now. For your trouble.
It's interesting. I have a friend who wrote a book about the experience of it in Roswell. And he said, if you're walking down the street and you see somebody with a navel belly button that sticks out, they're alien. Because the good people the other people have the innies.
They're going in.
The innies, So.
Good Lord, I hope we don't get in trouble for some kind of racism.
But you have to remember the location of Roswell is where this crash happened. That night was a major lightning storm, and they found it the next day. If the commander of the base, who had the recovery wreckage, would try to beat it, fold it, and it wouldn't fold. He said it's thinner than a cigarette wrapper. And there were hieroglyphics on some of the components that they got.
That's the Jesse Martell pictures with the stuff. Yeah.
And but I certainly don't believe it was crash test dummies. Okay, so a lot of stories come up. And Project Blue Book, I think, covered this.
What's his name? Heinel, who was the Heinet, who was the guy who in charge of Project Blue Book?
I remember watching it as a young guy.
There was a professor in charge of that, who actually was skeptical in the beginning. People who, I've suddenly forgot his name, but people who know this subject it's easy to find out who it was. It'll come to me in a second. But he became a believer towards the end of his career in the 70s. He started in the 50s. That something was going on.
You remember the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind? And
that guy's in the movie, the guy I'm just talking about.
Is this, okay.
As an extra.
Okay.
He's in that scene when the aliens walk out of the craft at the end.
Well, before that, when they
Spoiler alert.
find the five airplanes, that guy who was a UFOologist, he was a Frenchman. He wrote a book
Oh, that's right.
called Dimensions,
Yeah.
and he believed that these were actual dimensional situations, not
is
coming
possible.
down from.
Which is possible, because that's the area that's more likely mathematically, isn't it? That dimensional existence of things we don't understand. Tony, are you still there?
I'm alive and kicking.
What do you think about this story? It's incredible, isn't it? It's incredible that you were there. It's incredible your girlfriend was Hynek was the name of the guy. Hynek was the fellow who's in the movie and was in charge of the special projects.
See, this may now, after disclosing this to Anthony over here, he may no wonder he's weird, you know.
Yeah, exactly. No wonder you are, and I'm weird for wanting to talk about it. But be a voice of sanity, Tony, as a practical sort of fellow. What do you think when you hear things like this? Have you ever seen a UFO or anything like that? Have you ever seen one? I've never seen anything.
Never seen a UFO.
Yeah.
Honestly, to not be the sanity person, because there's really weird things out there, but I would like to believe that we're not alone out there. I mean, honestly, it's just too odd to think that we are alone. The only entity, the only living organism, even if it's not an amoeba in some other weird planet or whatever source of life that would be, it'd be cool. But yeah, dimensional things. I mean, honestly, we're barely just tapping into the weird world of science and physics and whatever physics defines what we think and what we do. So laws are always meant to be changed. Laws are not infinite. They're not finite. They're just theory at best. Until they're proven wrong. I mean, if you take Einstein's theory of relativity, that's even being challenged as we speak right now. Drives, that completely changes the entirety of what we think of travel and its basic ability to bend space-time with the abilities. It's just we don't have the materials or the technology to actually develop it. But in theory, it is possible. And that Mexican physicist that figured that out, who won the Nobel Prize, not Nobel Peace Prize, but Nobel Prize, for his research on that, actually proved it's actually possible. So that theory of that is an alien from another dimension, yeah, it's plausible.
The idea of dimensional travel always made a lot of sense to me. I don't know why. It's kind of intuitive, isn't it? The distances are so long, and we're just beginning to understand in the last 30 years about dimensions, that they're 12 instead of the original, what we thought 5 or something. They're actually 12, and how those work together, and the sort of, they're like membranes bouncing against each other. It's quite extraordinary. And then, so there could be all kinds of hidden things. It's like I always go back to the Twilight Zone in these moments, because so much of the intuition in those episodes has been proved to be true. I'm a big believer in intuition, I think. And I tend to think that most anything we can imagine
is real.
Is probably real, right? In some way. It's real out there somewhere, maybe in another dimension, maybe in a parallel universe, right?
That's why I say, there's a saying that I always tell people, it's like, impossible is not a thing that you should believe in. Everything is possible.
Yeah, and the fact that we are only beginning to touch the surface on what physics means, and how to define the existence that we observe.
Doc, yeah, hell, I mean, just 2 weeks ago, I think it was, the CERN here in Europe, because there's two CERNs. There's one in the U.S. and there's one here in Europe. I don't know where it is in
Switzerland, I believe. Yeah.
But okay, if it's
I think so. Yeah, I think I knew somebody who was working there.
Oh, that'd be cool.
Yeah.
They just figured out or discovered a new particle. Other than neutrinos, they just discovered a black matter particle.
Oh, interesting.
So,
yeah, I mean, as you say, you're just touching the surface. So why shouldn't there be? I mean, the funniest part is, why should there be little alien bodies? Why shouldn't they just be invisible, watching us? You know, moving amongst us? Right, moving amongst us, and or sometimes when you look at how crazy things have been in the last few years, they seem to be accelerating in craziness. They're just counterintuitive. So many things that are happening, and just the way people don't even bother. So many people in power don't even bother to approach a semblance of the truth anymore. And they just spout obvious nonsense, but if you say it enough, people are going to believe it.
Well,
it's like somebody's running the computer game, right?
Absolutely.
It seems that way. I know it's absurd, but
when we talk about UFOs, Ezekiel saw the wheel, in the Bible, and.
But tell us what that story means, as some people want to know.
Well, I don't know. I mean, he
about
was
Ezekiel.
evidently looking up in the air, and he saw this wheel, and then maybe a wheel within a wheel, and something like that. And
the idea being,
and yet, if you look at you go back to the Aztecs and the Incas and all these pictures, you see what looks like UFOs. The shape was consistent for many, many years.
Right.
And now it's a little elongated now, and it's a triangular now. So. They
Are we imagining these things into reality?
Well, there's certain things.
Are we just able to see them now?
Well,
They've always been there.
The Navy and the Air Force have pictures now, and the government in the United States is taking hearings on this. So maybe we'll get a clearer picture. Maybe we just have to accept there are many things we just don't understand and will never understand.
I just hope that I agree with you about that. There's a lot that we'll never understand, but and certainly in our lifetimes. But I just hope that they don't find out that the aliens shot JFK.
Well, they didn't.
That would be very upsetting.
They did.
If they found it.
I even have my doubts that Lee Harvey Oswald did. But anyway.
And you're from Texas, so yeah. I'll let you have the benefit.
We've
of
been
that.
down there and actually stood in that spot where the bullet struck him, in right outside of the.
It's not far, is it, from that window to the street where he was going? It's not a long shot, is it?
No, it's not a long shot.
Not with a scope.
But you got to be able to.
You could probably hit him with a shotgun.
Have to be a pretty good target area.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this was one bullet, then you reload and shoot again. So that was very accurate. So that will never be solved.
Yeah, we can't do the JFK
I never
thing.
understood that when we actually saw Lee Harvey Oswald get shot by Jack Ruby.
Yeah.
And Jack Ruby was alleged to have done it. The word alleged in murder situations and things we operate bothers me. I don't like the word alleged when
you
see the real
see
thing.
That's just because of...
This is alleged to be a cup,
But that's because of the alleged cup. Yeah, that's right. The alleged humor in this show. Yeah. Tony, as far as... do you think something happened at Roswell, just as a punter, as a person out there in the audience and in the world? He's been there. He grew up there. He never heard about it till, you spent like 7 years in school there or whatever?
Well, from the 6th through college.
Yeah.
From the 6th grade through college.
Right, because you went to New Mexico State, not far away. And you didn't even hear about it until 1980. It would seem that if it was so important, it would not have gone away. Because there were other incidents that stayed, very prevalent, like the one in Mount St. Helens or whatever. The guy flew over there in 1948
and got shot down. There was one pilot that got.
There was one that got shot down. That was a different incident. This fellow he reported there were saucer-shaped discs skipping across the air. That fellow. Plus, in Washington, we actually have films of this, of the 1952 incident in Washington, 2 separate nights in July. July seems to be the time, where these lighted saucer-shaped objects were seen over the Capitol. And that was front page news in the Washington Post. And not only... you can look that up, the Washington incident in the summer of 1952. I got interested in this one time and I had one of those intuitive leaps. I said, I think 1952 is special. And I just started researching 1952, and it turned out that was still to date, the summer of the most, and the year of the most sightings of UFOs ever. So that was just an intuitive leap. I don't know why I thought that, but it turned out to be true. I thought about writing something. I should write an article about that. At any rate, we've got to go. I want to thank you, Tony McFarlane from Bydgoszcz.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your excellent contributions this time and before. You're getting to be a regular face around here, and it's good to see you.
No, one time I'll make it down to the office there.
Yeah.
Please.
Thanks for being with us again. I really appreciate it. And I want to thank my friend also David Kaiser for being with us and talking about some of the events that are going on now. Good luck with your medical work that you're doing, David. Great things, Baylor University and other people, trying to help the injured who are coming out of, and the war wounded coming out of Ukraine. And thanks for the stories about UFOs. That's all we've got. Goodbye, everybody. You're looking well. Stay that way.